In the stormy, tempestuous weather of the weekend, Arsenal's bluff and bluster wasn't enough to take 3 points from our visit to Craven Cottage. And that's totally taken the wind out of our sails. But is this a measure of how far we've come as a team, that just a draw away to a team in 10th spot in the Premier League can invoke this level of disappointment, frustration, and effectively most of the places I've seen have given up on the title challenge, and it's not even mid-December yet. But don't worry, I'm not here to make an impassioned defence for how we're definitely going to win the title, because I feel exactly like you probably do, which is that although it's not mathematically over, something has got to change. And this video, I'm discussing the questions that arose out of the game, which just don't seem to go away, and I think do need to be addressed. The first of those is Arteta's mega mind. It's, does he overcomplicate situations? Isn't there a simpler solution to putting Thomas Partey at right back if you're missing a left back? Yes, Jurrien Timber plays there really well, but you do have Miles Lewis-Skelly, who you've repurposed as a left back from defensive midfielder, and of course you have Kieran Tierney, who clearly is not somebody that Mikel Arteta sees as a part of the future. But having said that, he is on the bench. If he's on the bench, surely there's going to be times where you play him. Apparently not. Apparently, instead of giving Kieran Tierney a run out against Fulham, where I think he could have done a good job, or Miles Lewis-Skelly for that matter, it wasn't like they were on us. It wasn't like they posed a huge attacking threat. A chance to blood a young player, a player I think has huge potential. But no, instead we went back to Thomas Partey at right back, which has never worked. And I understand that Thomas Partey did not spend a lot of time actually at right back, but he was out on the right and he wasn't as effective as we've seen him. In putting Thomas Partey to the right back, we play Jorginho, who didn't have one of his better games. The whole system that we play, surely it would be better if players knew where they were supposed to be at all times. I understand that losing someone like Gabriel means you have to bring in a lesser player. And Jacob Kivior is without question not Gabriel. Is Mikel Arteta over-tinkering? Is he trying to be too clever? There's a question there. There's a debate to be had there. Of course, none of us have the level of footballing experience that Mikel Arteta does. That's why he got the job. And, okay, so he might know more than us about how the team's performing in training and have a better footballing mind. But it doesn't mean he's always right. And it does feel now like if we see Thomas Partey back at right back, it's going to drive us all crazy, me included, right? So we could be right. So perhaps Thomas Partey is the wrong choice. Perhaps some of the other selections didn't go quite to plan. Perhaps some of the substitutions weren't made on time. Ethan Nwaneri could have replaced Odegaard sooner. It was quite obvious that Kai Havertz wasn't having a great day. Maybe throw in Gabby Jesus. And Raheem Sterling takes me to the second big question, which I think we can address here. And that is, consistently, season after season, Arteta does not seem to trust his bench. Last season, Fabio Vieira, Emil Smith-Rowe, Reiss Nelson and Eddie Nketiah were completely wasted. Last season, Emil Smith-Rowe, Fabio Vieira, Reiss Nelson, Eddie Nketiah barely got a sniff of a game. They all departed the club and new players came in. Marino, Calafiori and Raheem Sterling. Now, I know Calafiori's injured, Marino was injured, but Raheem Sterling, it's like he's replaced Reiss Nelson and Eddie Nketiah with a single player who he trusts even less than those two. Raheem Sterling is a player he worked with at Manchester City. I have to feel like Arteta would have had some input into whether we sign him or not. We know that in a transfer window, we needed a forward player. We needed some variety. We lost two attacking players, which, fair enough, perhaps they weren't quite right. But we replaced them with Raheem Sterling, and we were told that, the relationship between Arteta was great. Raheem Sterling is a great goal scorer. He's been a trophy winner wherever he's been, etc., etc. So none of us can understand how Raheem Sterling, on a game like yesterday where you need something different, isn't given a chance. He's fit. He's on the bench. It's just another case of a person on the bench that is never going to play. Aiden Heaven, no offence, but he's on that bench. I don't know why. So our bench is not good enough, and that's a consistent theme. So what's gone wrong? Have the board not financed the players that Arteta wants? Was there a disagreement between Edu and Arteta over who you should get? Did we try and get people and just not get them, and at the last minute have to make do with Raheem Sterling because no one else was available? After all, in summer we went for Benjamin Šeško. He decided to stay at Leipzig because he was worried about his path being blocked by Kai Havertz, and that's fair. But look, this takes me to the main thrust of this video, which is strikers. Surely we need to sign a striker. Now, this time last year, that conversation was in full swing. And lots of people were talking about Ivan Toney, who I was absolutely adamant I didn't want, Solanke or Ollie Watkins, Victor Osimhen, Kylian Mbappe, you name it. Strikers around the world were mentioned. We were linked with them. If he played up front, we were linked with him. But in the end, I didn't necessarily think we needed to go out and be held to ransom for a striker. And as the season progressed, we ended up scoring the most goals we've ever scored in the Premier League. But we only had 3 players that got into double digits. Leandro Trossard, Bukayo Saka and Kai Havertz. And this season, it's looking kind of similar. The point here is that last season, I didn't think we needed a striker, but we still had Eddie Nketiah on the bench. So, in theory, we had Kai Havertz, Gabby Jesus and Eddie Nketiah. Well, we've let Nketiah go. So we are down 2 strikers. And it's starting to feel a little bit like Arsenal just don't ever want to sign a striker. The January transfer window is coming up. And it's not impossible that we could go out there and sign a Victor Gyökeres, Victor Osimhen, or Alexander Isak. And any one of those could be the difference. But signing a player of that stature in January is unlikely, is going to be prohibitively expensive, and may upset the delicate chemistry of the team. So I'm not convinced we're going to do it. I'm not saying I don't want us to do it. I actually do, but I don't think we're going to do it. And as Red Eye Guna pointed out, a player who could make a huge difference to us, whilst not technically being a striker, and there'll be time to discuss this at another point, but Matheus Cunha from Wolverhampton Wanderers, with Martinelli's form dipping, with Leandro Trossard not quite what he was, another option to come on. If we're not going to trust Raheem Sterling, then we definitely need somebody that we could throw on the pitch, either as a winger on the left or as a false 9 or perhaps even as a midfielder pushing forward in that left 8 position. But this video is about strikers. And my point here is that we are currently scoring 37% of our chances. Liverpool are at 41%, Chelsea at 41%, and the difference, that 4% difference, equates to about 8 goals that we would be better off if we were just a little bit more clinical. I really like Kai Havertz. I think his overall play is great. But when it's not working, when Kai Havertz isn't working, throwing Gabby Jesus onto the pitch is definitely not working. Look, I was chuffed when we signed him. People were saying when we did sign him that he is not an out-and-out goal scorer and he never will be. The reason he left Man City is because he didn't want to play out wide. He wanted to play through the middle. Well, I think at a certain point you have to say when an experiment's not working. He has had his injury troubles, but he scored 15 goals in 65 games, which doesn't sound terrible. It kind of is for what we need. But when you think that in his first season he scored 11 goals, in his second season he scored 4, and he's now not scored this season, you start to think that maybe Gabby Jesus is not going to find some electrifying form and make himself the front man that we need. So that's where we are at the moment. If Kai Havertz isn't working during a game, or it doesn't look like it's working, you can't take him off and throw on Gabby Jesus and expect a hat full of goals. And whilst, yes, we score goals from all over the place, means that we can go and put 5 past Sporting or 5 past West Ham, that we clock up goals in games where we're doing really well from all over the pitch. In the close games, the tight games, where one goal, where being really efficient, one shot, one strike, one shot, one goal is really important, we're just not going to be there. And that's an endless frustration in games like Newcastle away, Bournemouth away. I know that Bournemouth away we went down to 10 men, but that's the times where you need to be even more clinical, right? When you're not creating a hatful of chances. At the moment, we score lots of goals because we create lots of chances in the tighter, closer games. Alan Pardew said this on TalkSport today. That's where you need the striker. And even if it's somebody that isn't starting, somebody go on and has an eye for goal, that hunger, that selfishness, to play like a striker, to play like a centre forward. And it is baffling to me that even though we've only signed 2 strikers since Arteta joined the club, we've actually sold 5, which is a natural deficit. Lacazette, Welbeck, Aubameyang, Folarin Balogun, Eddie Nketiah. These might not be the right player for us, but to sell them and not bring in anybody to replace them, it's starting to get a bit irritating, to be honest with you. And I'm not irritated because I don't think we'll go out there and sign Victor Osimhen, Gyökeres or Isak. I'm actually more irritated that we don't seem ever to sign a young prospect striker. Not out there doing a Brighton or a Brentford or even a Chelsea where they will splash a few million on a young prospect and hope that they turn up good. We literally aren't signing anyone. We may have some sort of gentleman's agreement for Benjamin Šeško, but he won't necessarily be a proven success. And the amount we're going to pay for him is going to go up after another season at Leipzig. So my big question in this video, which I would dearly love your comment and answers on, is what has happened to our scouting? Because it seems like all the fans are saying the same people because they're proven winners. And that's what we need. We need to go and sign a proven goal scorer. Otherwise, we're taking a risk with this season and probably in the next one, right? But we also, on top of that, yes, I'd love to see us go and sign Alexander Isak, but I also want to see us sign a young player who has yet to prove themselves and has potential. And so instead of just being one of these shouting voices that says, we need to do this and not say who I think it is, I thought I'd come up with a very short list of players that are eminently gettable. One player that would normally have made my shortlist is Evan Ferguson, one of the youngest players in the Premier League ever to have scored a hat-trick, and it did look like he was a really exciting player. At the moment, he's just not getting into the Brighton team, and he's had some injuries, and the price tag they wanted for him was around 80 million, which is kind of not going to happen. At the moment, it's probably lower. It's probably at 60 million, but that's still a lot to pay for a player who might not quite fit your system, and you know, it's going to put pressure on you to play him if you spent as much on him as you did on Kai Havertz. Maybe we're just too penny pinching. So I'm ruling Evan Ferguson out. But one young player who's really burning it up at the moment in the Portuguese Primeira Division, I know we're all talking about Gyökeres coming and he's the top goal scorer there. But the second top goal scorer is Samu Omorodion Agahawa. Now, he very nearly joined Chelsea for about 6 million. There was a problem with an ankle injury, and this is this summer. There was a contract dispute which almost scuppered the deal. But in the end, actually, it wasn't that. It was in a medical, they found ankle injuries. Well, it can't have been particularly serious because he's in a goal a game at the moment. And he is, as I said, Portuguese football's second top goal scorer. Signed for Porto from Atletico Madrid for around 15 million. You have to think, he is a potential talent. I know that there are no guarantees when you sign young strikers. It can go well or it can go badly. But at some point, you do have to take a risk. You have to take some kind of risk. And this one, for me, doesn't seem too much of a risk. He's been capped at every level for Spanish football and has scored in almost all of them, except he's only had one cap at senior level. And 15 million in summer, you're looking at potential 45 million pound fee if Porto will part with him. But he's 20 years old and has the world at his feet. So this is the kind of risk I don't think would be a bad idea to take. Then there's Youssoufa Moukoko, currently on loan at Nice, where he's played 6 times, scored 2 goals. But he's a Borussia Dortmund player, he's 20 years old. And whilst he hasn't been hugely prolific, he is still developing and has bags of potential. How much it would cost to get him from Dortmund, if indeed they were prepared to sell him, is up in the air. But let's say 30 to 40 million might well do it. German sides do tend to sell. In my opinion, he's very much one to watch and a player that I would be delighted to see us take on. I mean, surely our coaching staff are able to get the best out of one of these young players. At the top of my list, though, and I'm a little bit biased, as a Red Bull Salzburg fan, I've seen a lot of him. But Karim Konate played in the team at the same time as Benjamin Šeško. And if you adjust for their ages, at the point where Šeško was scoring 16 goals in the Bundesliga, in the Austrian Bundesliga, Konate scored 20. He not only has a Bundesliga title, but he's also an AFCON winner. And I don't know if And I really think you could get him for around 15 million. He's not exactly a graceful player, but what he is, he's an excellent goal poacher. He has confidence in front of goal, which I'm sure could come and go, but he has all of the makings of a really good striker to come. He's 20 years old, and I think we'd pick him up for under 20 million. A huge prospect. Certainly, if you're that convinced by Benjamin Sesko, you've definitely seen Karim Konate play. And all right, Salzburg are going through a really bad season. After winning 10 Bundesligas in a row, it's fallen off a cliff right now. His goals aren't where they were, but I think if you put him in a team like ours, he's an option off the bench, definitely. And frankly, this is me trying to do some recruitment for Arsenal. This is me scouting. Surely we have a great scouting network. Surely somebody at Arsenal's got their eye on the next future player. And maybe it's because we're so tight-lipped and keep all this to our keep our cards so close to our chest that we haven't heard of him. But frankly, we need strikers. We need one proven striker and at least one potential striker. And I'd be delighted if after signing an Alexander Isak or a Gyökeres, we went and signed a player I've never heard of before. Marcus Leonardo was one player like that who left Brazil to go to Benfica, started scoring for fun, and then inexplicably has ended up in Saudi Arabia. I think once a player's gone to Saudi Arabia, there's not as much chance of them coming back to Arsenal. There's not as much chance of them coming to Arsenal. So I've kind of called on him. Maybe you know a young player that I haven't mentioned. Red Eye, if you're watching this, I know Cunha is on your list, but I'm going to do a separate video about that. I'm totally on board with you on this one, but he's not necessarily the striker that we're looking for. And a team like ours does need more than two strikers, particularly if one of them hasn't scored in a year. That's kind of Richarlison levels, right? So let me know if you think I'm wildly wrong. If you don't think we need a striker, if there's other positions we need more. If there's other positions you think we need more. And please do leave your comments. And if you haven't yet, then obviously click like and subscribe. And until I see you again, be lucky. Lots of love.